You meet your deadlines, you show up on time, you answer emails promptly, you maintain relationships, you pay your bills. From the outside, you look like you have it together, like you're managing life successfully. Like anxiety isn't something you struggle with because you're clearly functioning just fine. But inside, it's different. Inside, there's a constant hum of worry that never fully stops, a mental checklist that updates faster than you can complete it, a voice that tells you you're forgetting something, missing something, about to fail at something even though you haven't failed at anything yet. This is functional anxiety, and it's invisible precisely because it works, because it keeps you moving, keeps you producing, keeps you looking competent while slowly consuming you from the inside. Nobody sees it. Because you've learned to carry it quietly. There's a woman who has never missed a deadline in her career. She's reliable, organized, the person everyone counts on to deliver quality work on time. But what they don't see is the 3 nights she didn't sleep because she was convinced she missed something. The hours she spent rereading emails before sending them. The paralysis that hits her every time she starts a new project because the possibility of failure feels unbearable. She functions, but functioning costs her everything. And no one knows because she's learned to hide the cost behind competence. This is what most people miss about functional anxiety. It doesn't look like a struggle, it looks like success, like discipline, like someone who has their life together. And because it looks that way, people assume you're fine. That anxiety isn't really a problem for you, that you're handling it, but you're not handling it, you're surviving it, and there's a difference. Functional anxiety is what happens when your nervous system runs on high alert, but you've learned to keep moving anyway. When the anxious mind generates constant worst-case scenarios, but you've trained yourself to work through them. When overthinking consumes your mental energy, but you still meet every external expectation. You're productive, but you're not okay. There's a student who gets straight grades, turns in every assignment early, participates in class, appears engaged and capable, but she rewrites every paper 5 times. Checks her submitted work obsessively to make sure she didn't miss anything. Stays up until 3 in the morning not because the work requires it, but because her brain won't let her stop until it's perfect. And perfect is never actually achievable, so she just keeps working, keep checking, keep pushing, while her body screams for rest and her mind generates new things to worry about. This is the trap of functional anxiety. It masquerades as excellence, as high standards, as caring about quality, and maybe those things are part of it, but underneath it's fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being exposed as someone who's just pretending to be competent. And that fear drives you harder than any genuine motivation ever could. Most people with functional anxiety don't recognize it as anxiety. They think anxiety looks like panic attacks, like inability to leave the house, like obvious visible struggles, but functional anxiety is quieter. It's the person who shows up to everything but spends the entire time monitoring whether they're doing it right. The person who completes tasks but can't enjoy the completion because they're already worried about the next thing. You don't break down, you just never fully relax. There's a man who works a demanding job. He's good at it, respected, promoted regularly. But every morning, he wakes up with his mind already racing through everything that could go wrong that day. Every meeting is a potential disaster he needs to prepare for. Every email is a test he might fail. Every project is an opportunity to be revealed as inadequate. And so he overprepares, staying late, check everything multiple times, builds elaborate contingency plans for scenarios that will probably never happen. And when things go well, which they usually do, he doesn't feel relief. He just feels temporary reprieve before the next worry arrives. This is what functional anxiety does. It steals your ability to enjoy success, because success is never final. It's just a brief pause before the next opportunity to fail. People see your accomplishments and assume you're confident, that you must feel good about what you've achieved. But you don't. You feel like you got lucky, like you fooled everyone, like it's only a matter of time before someone realizes you're not as capable as you appear. This is imposter syndrome, and it thrives in the space between what you accomplish and what you believe you deserve. Functional anxiety convinces you that your success isn't real, that it's just the result of working harder than everyone else to compensate for the inadequacy you're certain exists beneath the surface. And so you keep working, keep pushing, keep proving, even though nothing you accomplish ever feels like enough. There's a woman who maintains a full social calendar. She shows up for friends, remembers birthdays, plans gatherings, responds to texts promptly. From the outside, she looks socially competent, engaged, connected. But every interaction leaves her drained, not because she doesn't enjoy people, but because she's monitoring constantly, reading tone, analyzing responses, making sure she didn't say anything wrong. And when she gets home, she replays every conversation, builds cases for why people probably think she's annoying, convinces herself that she talked too much or not enough or said something that came across wrong. This is functional anxiety in social settings. You participate, you connect, but the entire time you're working, and the work doesn't end when the interaction does. It continues for hours, sometimes days, and no one sees it. Because you've learned to perform ease while experiencing hypervigilance. The reason functional anxiety is so exhausting is because it requires you to operate on two levels simultaneously. The surface level where you're completing tasks, having conversations, meeting expectations. And the internal level where you're constantly assessing threats, preparing for problems, managing the fear that everything is about to fall apart. Most people only operate on the surface level. They do the task and move on. You do the task while running worst-case scenarios about everything that could go wrong, and both processes require energy. But only one of them is visible. There's a man who takes care of everything. He manages the household, pays bills on time, handles logistics, remembers appointments. His family depends on his reliability, and he delivers. But what they don't see is the mental load he carries, the constant awareness of everything that needs doing, the background anxiety that something will slip through the cracks if he's not vigilant. He doesn't forget things because he can't afford to, because forgetting feels catastrophic, because his worth feels tied to his ability to keep everything running smoothly. And so he stays alert, always tracking, always planning, always prepared. This is mental exhaustion disguised as competence, and it's sustainable only until it isn't. Functional anxiety doesn't lead to immediate breakdown. It leads to slow erosion of energy, of joy, of the ability to be present. You keep functioning, but the person doing the functioning becomes less and less connected to anything that feels meaningful. You're completing tasks, but you're not experiencing life. You're managing, but you're not living. And eventually something gives, not dramatically, just quietly. You stop caring about things that used to matter, stop finding joy in accomplishments, stop feeling anything except the constant low-grade tension that's become your baseline. This is emotional burnout, and it's where functional anxiety lies when it's ignored long enough. There's a woman who realized she couldn't remember the last time she felt genuinely relaxed, the last time she did something without simultaneously thinking about what she needed to do next, the last time she enjoyed a moment without her mind generating the next problem to solve. She was functioning, but she wasn't okay, and the scariest part was that no one could tell because she'd become so good at hiding the cost, so she practiced at appearing fine. So skilled at maintaining the performance, even as the person performing it was disappearing. This is the danger of functional anxiety. It's praised, rewarded, reinforced. People tell you you're doing great, that they wish they had your discipline, that you're so organized, so reliable, so capable, and none of that is wrong. But it's also not the whole picture. Because what they're seeing is the output, not the process, not the sleepless nights, not the constant worry, not the way you're burning through yourself to maintain the appearance of competence. The first step to addressing functional anxiety is recognizing it exists, that just because you're functioning doesn't mean you're not struggling, that productivity isn't the same as well-being, that meeting expectations isn't the same as taking care of yourself. You're allowed to be successful and still be suffering. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. There's a man who thought that if he could just achieve enough, the anxiety would quiet, that if he proved himself capable, his brain would finally believe it. That success would silence the voice telling him he's not good enough. But it didn't, because functional anxiety isn't about external validation. It's about internal safety. And no amount of achievement creates safety when your nervous system is wired to scan for threat. He could accomplish everything and still wake up anxious, because the anxiety isn't about what he's doing. It's about how his brain learned to respond to uncertainty, to the possibility of failure, to the risk of not being enough. And those fears don't disappear through achievement. They disappear through addressing the nervous system patterns creating them. This means recognizing when you're operating from fear instead of choice, when you're checking something for the fifth time not because it needs checking, but because your anxiety demands it. When you're saying yes to something not because you want to, but because saying no feels dangerous. Functional anxiety keeps you busy, keep proving, keeps you moving, and all of that movement prevents you from stopping long enough to ask whether you actually want the life you're building or whether you're just trying to stay ahead of the fear. There's a woman who realized she'd built an entire career around avoiding the feeling of inadequacy. Every promotion was just another way to prove she wasn't the failure her anxiety told her she was. Every accomplishment was just temporary relief from the constant worry that she wasn't enough, and she was exhausted, not from the work itself, but from the underlying motivation, from trying to outrun a feeling that work could never actually resolve. This is what functional anxiety costs. It keeps you achieving, but it steals the meaning from the achievement. You get the outcome, but you don't get the satisfaction, because the satisfaction is always conditional, always temporary, always undermined by the next thing you need to prove. The path forward isn't about achieving less. It's about examining why you're achieving, what you're trying to prove, who you're trying to prove it to, and whether any of it is actually creating the safety you're seeking. Most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, you're just feeding a pattern, working harder to quiet an anxiety that interprets hard work as confirmation that there's something to be anxious about. This is the paradox. Your functional anxiety tells you that if you just do enough, you'll finally feel safe, but doing more just teaches your brain that constant doing is required for safety, and so the cycle continues. More work, more worry, more proof that you can't afford to stop. Breaking the cycle requires you to practice something counterintuitive: rest without earning it, completion without perfection, existing without constant productivity. And every time you do this, you teach your nervous system something new. That safety doesn't require constant vigilance, that you're allowed to stop without everything falling apart, that your worth isn't contingent on your output. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean you stop being productive. It just means you stop using productivity as a way to manage anxiety. You start doing things because you choose them, not because your fear demands them. There's a man who started saying no, not to everything, just to the things he was doing purely to avoid the discomfort of disappointing someone, and it was terrifying. His anxiety told him that saying no meant he was selfish, unreliable, failing. But nothing terrible happened. People adjusted, and he realized that his functional anxiety had convinced him that his worth was tied to his availability, that being needed was the same as being valued, that if he stopped doing everything, people would stop caring. But that wasn't true, and recognizing that truth gave him space to exist as something other than a function. This is what recovery from functional anxiety looks like: not dysfunctional, but choosing a function that serves you instead of fear, building a life based on what matters instead of what anxiety demands, showing up from capacity instead of obligation. You'll still be capable, still reliable, still someone people can count on, but you'll also be someone who exists beyond those roles, someone who's allowed to rest, to feel, to be imperfect without it means you're inadequate. Functional anxiety taught you that productivity equals safety. You're learning now that safety comes from accepting yourself even when you're not producing, even when you're not perfect, even when you're just being. And that acceptance is the only thing that actually quiets the noise. Subscribe to The Anxious Mind to understand your anxiety without shame and train a calmer mind. Like this video if you want clarity without judgment. If you have functional anxiety, what's one thing you do that looks productive but is really just anxiety in disguise? Leave it in the comments. And if this resonated, the next video will show you why rest feels impossible even when your body is begging for it. Thank you for being here. You're not alone in this.